Why? Who knows? But I had jeans and a t-shirt on because, we're out of date, so I wanted to dress nice. I had this long black trench coat, and we went to West Town Mall, which is a very elite mall in Madison. And as we walk in whatever big department store and walk through it to get to the mall area, there's a player piano, a grand player piano, roped off with red ropes, and it's a player piano, and it's playing Christmas songs. So, picture it, bench, no one's sitting there, but it's just playing. It's playing beautiful Christmas songs. Like if it was playing Jingle Bells, it wasn't just playing two notes at a time. Ring, ling, 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 like that. And so she goes, I'm going to go over here. And I go, okay, I'll just stand here. I'm standing by the piano. And I'm realizing no one's really paying attention. So I step over the rope. I sit down on the bench. I take my trench coat. I float behind me. So it's like big. And I just act like I'm playing. And I mean, in 5 minutes, I've got 30 people. And they're just like, oh. And after the end of every song, like, oh, wow. And so as I'm playing, I see my wife come out of the store. She comes out of the store, she goes, and just starts walking down the, and so a song ended. And I get up, I go, I need to take a break. And everyone's like, oh, thank you, God. And I step on, I go, you're welcome. And as I start to walk away, it starts playing again. I feel sad, and I go, and then, well, that's fun. Awesome. It was awesome. Yes. I need to wear my glasses today. Little foxes. Meant something different in the 80s growing up. We say little foxes. Remember that? Wow, she's a fox. There's a bunch of foxes over there. Now I get excited, I grab my bow or my gun. Foxes where? About 10 years ago, Reader's Digest did an impromptu survey where they asked over 9,000 people that had been divorced. They asked them basically 2 questions, but they came away with 4 different results. The 2 questions they asked were, number 1, did you get divorced over a big issue? And number 2, could you have fixed it? And in the answer of could you have fixed it, the idea was, would it have been a big fix? Like, the truth is you can fix anything in a relationship. But they wanted to know, was it going to be a big fix, like a huge fix? Like, if this is going to work, we're going to have to do all this stuff. And they were doing it in light of turning around and asking some experts in marriage to write an article according to the findings that they found. Did not go as planned. Because out of the 9,000 people that they asked who had been through divorce, when they asked, was it a big issue? And they'd all been divorced for a few years, so it wasn't fresh. Out of the 9,000, over 90% said, actually, no, it wasn't a big issue. And they went on to say, and could we have fixed it? Yes, we could have fixed it, and it wouldn't have been a big fix. So they got really curious, like, okay, so if the majority of you looking back say, we could have saved our marriage, we could have fixed it, and it wouldn't have been a big fix, why get a divorce, right? So they continued with this research, and they found this. They wish they would have stayed married. Looking back, they wish them, even though some of them had remarried, and even remarried a 3rd time, the majority of them looked back to their first marriage and said, I wish I would have stayed married to that person. The other thing they found, which is incredible, was that when they asked, was it a big problem or a little problem, it was a little fox, meaning that little thing in the dryer that makes me, that they wouldn't even have had to have gone to counseling for. And my sister and I, we talk about this a lot. The majority of the people that come into a counselor's office, they already know what they need to do. They're not there to find out what they need to do. They're there to get encouragement and tools to take those steps. But here's the most interesting thing. So you have a little issue, and it causes the divorce. And you could have fixed it. And so post-divorce, you go, why didn't you fix it? Because they didn't deal with it immediately. So what happened is that little issue begins to wear each other out. If you know anything about human psyche, you understand that we need emotional energy to govern our physical energy, our social energy, our spiritual energy, everything. Our emotional energy is kind of the puppet that holds the strings to all the other areas of our life. So what happened is that one little issue so grinded them down, so grinded them down, so grinded them down, so grinded them down. And it might have been their issue or it might have been their spouse's issue, didn't matter. And over time, they had so much emotional energy and just exhausted to, even if they said it's a small issue and we can fix it, I just can't, I'm too fried, I'm too burned out. So I'll just divorce. Because what feeds us emotionally is a new relationship. Right? I mean, you get in a new relationship, everything's perfect. Like, oh, they're thin, they're muscular, they're cute, they're handsome, they're rich. We get fed emotionally, and it charges us up, and we think, well, I came out of a relationship where I was emotionally drained, even though it was your fault because you didn't deal with the issue. I gravitate towards a relationship that now fills me emotionally. But the point is that it takes the emotional energy to fix the problem. You have to be emotionally charged. And I've talked about this many times, not only on the podcast, but in sermons. Have you ever been just so tired, you're like, I gotta go home and just crash. I've been up too many hours, worked too hard, and and your buddy calls and says, hey, we're going up skiing tonight. Wanna go? Yeah! What happened? You were tired. Yeah, I'm gonna be with my buddies. Emotional energy. I'm gonna do something I love, skiing. And all of a sudden your emotional energy was able to say, well, it doesn't matter how tired I am, let's do this. Or just the opposite. You've had all the rest in the world, you've had, everything's going great. But emotionally you're fried, and someone asks you to do something you like, but just emotionally you're like, I just need to go home and just crash. I just need to go to sleep. Or how many times you said, I can't wait to go home and go to bed, because then I can escape all the emotional drain that's going on. And so they go through this survey and they find out if you would have taken real simple steps at the very beginning of your relationship with those little tiny things that are bothering you, that you could have in turn, before you went to a counselor or before you ran its course and burned out and divorced, you could have simply taken some real easy steps to have fixed your own relationship and not be the person who looks back from now, 10, 20 years from now and say, I wish I would have stayed married to that person. And that's a whole other sermon. We could get into it at some point. But think of it this way. And I just love to be kind of in your face about it. Most of you are married to someone, and that's as good as it's going to get. And if you think you're going to divorce them and find someone better, you're not. You're older. You're more haggard. You're more set in your ways. You're harder to team up with because you're... When you were young, you'd say yes to anything. Oh, yeah, I'd do that. Yeah, I love to clean. I don't know who just said that, but it just came out of my mouth. When you get older, like, I don't care if I ever clean my bathroom. Pubic hair on my toilet from 12 years ago. I don't care. It's going to be more on there, so why clean? I mean, it's as good as it's going to get. You might as well work on what you have now. You might as well work on what you have now. But it's the little things that tear away at that emotional energy. So, when you look at how we're supposed to raise kids from a biblical perspective, and we're going somewhere, I'm not chasing the rabbit. We understand that the Bible has different levels of how you train your child. First, there has to be teaching. When they're young, you teach them. Don't stick a knife into the outlet. Have you ever had that conversation with your kids? If not, you might never have that conversation with your kids. Think about that. You teach them. Don't run out into the street. Don't do. And then, if they don't do that, then you correct them. Oh, no. When I said don't stick a knife in the light socket, I also meant a fork or a spoon. I'm going to correct your behavior. Oh, no. When I say don't run out into the street, I also mean don't pedal your big wheel out into the street. Don't, so there's all this correction to go along with the teaching. And then, if they disagree, or if they go against it anyway, and they still run out in the street, or they stick, Ken's Barbie doll foot in the light socket, then you discipline. look, we've talked to you, we've told you, we said if you have any questions, to talk to us, but you disobeyed, so now I'm going to discipline you, and we're going to take your Ken Barbie doll away, or we're not going to let you play in the front yard anymore next to the street, and you discipline. And if they continue to break the rules or break what you've taught them, the discipline goes up. And each time you discipline, you again correct and you teach. Correct? But there is a point where there's punishment. You don't say anything, you're not going to teach them, you're going to make them feel it. And so they run out into the street, and you just run up there, you grab them by the hand, and you just paddle them on the bottom, and they're yelling and screaming, and now all the neighbors think you're a horrible parent because they haven't seen everything that went on before. And you get in your mind, you're grounded. The problem is in most families where there's a breakdown in why kids don't grow up understanding authority or have problems, is that parents go from step 1 to step 4. So you have the 3 or 4-year-old who runs out in the street. They've never been taught. They've never been corrected. They've never been disciplined. So the parent just goes, "What are you doing?" and just starts battling them. Or they walk in and they're sticking something in the light socket. They've never been told not to stick anything in the light socket. And they just go, "Wah-ya!" I saw a lot of this in the inner city. And you want to say, look, a kid, honestly, it makes sense to you and I, but a kid honestly doesn't know you don't put something in a light socket. They don't understand. I was 22 years old, and I was polishing my boat with an electric buffer. And I had 3 power cords, daisy chained together, and my boat was in the water. And I'm 22. Not realizing that where it's linked together can go in the water. And it doesn't matter that they're plugged in or not. And guess what? It woke me up. Yeah. I didn't know. I was 22. So what does this have to do? The process is the same in relationships. If my spouse is doing something that bothers me, if I don't learn how to approach them and talk to them about it, what happens is it irritates, and finally I say, I hate the way you chew your food. You chew your food like your father. You're like, where did this come from? Oh, I mentioned it before. You said it once, but just try to record it. And you go from 1 to 4. Now, the beauty of working with a child is you understand that when you go through those stages, steps 1, 2, 3, 4, that if you do it correctly, you actually build a greater bond with the child. You build a greater relationship. Even if at the end you end up having to spank them once or twice. With your spouse, same thing. There's a little issue, a little fox. But if you learn how to approach that and work on that, it actually strengthens the relationship. And rather than say, "Why do you always chew like that? Man, it makes me sick. I can't even believe the food stays in your mouth." You can be sitting across the table, talking, and look at your spouse and they can say something and you can just smile and go, "I don't know." And then, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And you can laugh about it. Because you've learned how to take these steps in dealing with the small thing. You know what's most interesting to me in this whole process of thinking about what I was going to share on today? I've known the verse in Solomon chapter 2 forever. It's the little foxes that spoil the vine. That's not what it says. It's the little foxes that spoil the vineyard. If you don't deal with that issue, it's not just going to affect one area of your relationship, it's going to affect every area of your relationship. Have you ever been so upset at your spouse that even when they bring you good news, you don't care? Guess what? I saved a bunch of money on insurance with Geico. I don't know, that's the only thing that popped into my head. But you're so mad at them about something else, you don't care. Like, Again, we haven't learned how to deal with those little things. So, today, let's take a little bit of time and unpack this. How do we go ahead and look at the little things and make the little things a step of how to grow closer to the other person than have them grind us down and wear us out? So, little things. First, identify little things. Because the problem is, I may not know the little things that drive you crazy. Step one, Tony, what are the little things that drive you crazy about me? Well, how much time do you have? You know, a lot of little things. You have to ask, what are the, I'm not going to take out a piece of paper and write down your little things. It's not how it works. The author says, I'm to catch my foxes. I catch my foxes. So Tim, what are my foxes? What are my little things? What you go to your spouse. Hey, what are my little things? The amount of humility that takes proves whether you want that relationship to make it or not. You understand? The amount of humility to go and say, tell me what I need to work on is probably one of the greatest ways to say, I care so much about a relationship, I'm putting myself on the chopping block, and you tell me what I need to work on. And then you just listen. You don't get defensive. Just what are the little things that I do that drive you crazy? So you have to identify them. Here's one of the things that drive me crazy and I don't do nearly as much counseling as my sister, and I'm not as good of a counselor as Jason or my sister. I'm more of a coach. But when people come in and they identify the little things, well, he calls me dumbass. Well, he always teases me about how I can't cook. Well, she teases me about this in the bedroom. Or they always point this out to my parents. And it seems like passing things like, well, whatever, not a big deal. But there are little things that start to grind. Little things many times about love languages. Well, I wish he would do this more. I wish he would do this more. I wish he would do this more. This is my point. Many times someone in counseling will say, well, I wish he was more affectionate. Usually it's the man who's not affectionate. And I always hear this, well, that's just not who I am. I wish he served me more. Well, that's just not who I am. I wish he listened to me more and was more attentive. Well, that's just not who I am. I wish he didn't try to fix things all the time. Well, that's just not who I am. That's a complete lie. Absolute, bold-faced, demonic lie. It's a demonic lie. And I will prove it. So, Annabelle, I wish my wife was, I'll pick on me. My wife wishes I was more affectionate. And I say, that's just not who I am. Finish this for me. And the two shall become, well, I guess now I am. Well, I'm not affectionate. Oh, you are now, because you married her. I'm not the kind to always worry about picking up and emptying the dishwasher and wiping out the counters. I think that's getting carried away. Well, now you are. Because you're now one. So no more excuses about, well, that's just not me. It is now. It's who you are. You got married. It's now who you are. So we identify these little things and we realize, now I have to take responsibility because it's who I am. Your little thing is now my little thing because we're one. The way I chew my food is now a thing I need to work on because it's who I am. It's something that now bothers me. There's a change in my shift. I'm sorry what I do bothers you. But what happens when I say, I'm sorry of what I do, that it bothers you? I now take responsibility. I don't want to bother you. I'm now owning this little thing. So you find out what they are, you own them. Next, and I had to rewrite my notes because my sister took a bunch of what I said. My only hope was that I preached everything that Jason was going to say and he has to readjust before he gets up here. Next is when you identify, you don't try to fix. Which sounds completely backwards. So what are the things I need to work on? Identify my little foxes. And you identify them, but then you don't try to fix them. Why is that? Because if I tell you what you need to change, most of the time you take it as rejection. So you don't like the way I chew? Not really, no. Oh, so I'm the problem. See, I feel rejected. You don't like that I don't come up and put my arm around you and kiss you in public? I only do it when I want to take you to bed at night when we're alone? Yeah. Oh, well. And so we just simply identify. We don't try to fix that person. We don't tell them how they can change. We don't tell them they need to change. We've just come to a level of maturity in our relationship where we identify our little foxes, like, identify my little foxes. And then hopefully they say, identify my little foxes. And then what we do is it's up to me to change. I don't tell you how to change, because all you hear is, I'm never going to accept you unless you change. I'm going to reject you until you change. I'm not going to fully love you until you change. I'm not always going to be there for you unless you change. Our marriage is never going to be good enough unless you change. That's really what they hear. But I do the opposite when I work on it, because then I'm saying, you know what? I love us so much, I'm going to work on me. Not, I love us so much that I'm going to work on you. Which is the way it is, a lot of marriages. It's so funny, as a counselor, it's become so just, it's just so expected. You come in, you chit-chat a little. If they're from the church, you got to get through the small talk first. And, if they're not from the church, it usually goes a little faster. But yeah, the small talk, this, that, and then like, so why are you guys here? What's the problem? They'll state the problem, somewhat ambiguously, I don't know. And then within the next minute, someone will start to tell me what they need to change and what they do wrong. I don't think I've ever had a time where I sit down and someone says, well, this is our problem, and I really need you to help me change. I'd probably just pass out. Like, what? Why are you here? If you already know what the problem is and you already know you should change, because it's not who we are. So we identify, and we don't try to change them. We identify, and I'm just going to change me. So, in relationships, when we talk about change can mean rejection, there is one thing I don't hear talked about enough that is really important because of our culture. I won't have you raise your hands because the point is not to embarrass you. But if I asked how many of you have come from divorced homes, the majority of you, statistics say 75% of you would raise your hands. We came from a family that was divorced. So when you come from a family of divorce, it's proven that one of the number one issues, some say the number one issue, that you have as a child who's come from a divorced relationship and you enter into marriage is this: you can't handle conflict. You can't deal with conflict. So when we talk about identifying the little foxes, all the more I need to, okay, I'm going to work on mine, you work on you, because if I identify your foxes and say, here's what you need to do, not only can I not handle that because it seems like rejection, I don't do confrontation. I don't do it. And in fact, the funny thing is the surveys show that if you've come out of a family where your mom or dad was married or divorced twice or 3 times, it elevates. And you see these relationships where someone will come in and say, let me tell you the problem. And the person goes, well, okay, well let's talk about this. I'm not going to talk about it. No, it's not my problem. You're like, well, can we at least discuss it? No. If you don't know how to fix it, it's not my problem. And you go, well, hold on, let's just debrief here. Let's talk. I'm not going to talk. It's not my problem. I'm not going to talk about it. Well, you just unloaded 2 bags of trash on me about how I need to change and be better. Can you help me? I'm not dealing with this right now, which means never. They can't handle conflict. They have no problem pointing out all your foxes. But they're not going to deal with the conflict of resolving them. So a lot of times people just never resolve. But you skirt that issue by saying, oh, thank you. Thank you for just vomiting on me. It was warm and awesome, and I can see what you just read and who you were around, and I'm going to embrace it all, and I'm going to change. Oh, you always say you're going to change. I'm going to try this time. I'm going to stay accountable to the pastor, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to read a good book, and I'm going to change. And you totally negate their need to have to be confrontational because you're not going to confront them. You say, great, then I'm going to change. Thank you so much. I'm going to change. You know what the greatest seed to change is? You know how I best make you change? I change. You know, there are all these, amazing survey studies where they put people in rooms and they have someone with a little more of a dominant personality and they know they're there to talk and they're like, hey, hi, what's your name? And they'll cross their legs. I'll be, hey, what's up? And the other person, without even thinking, a minute later will cross their legs. And we're talking, and then they'll cross their legs and they'll fold their hands. Well, that's interesting, blah, blah, blah. And a minute later, the person will uncross their legs and they'll fold their arms. And they simply mimic the behavior of the other person as they change. What was the biggest slang word you grew up with as a kid? Mine was dude.
Yeah.
What was yours? Wicked. Awesome. We used to have one, triple Z. Still don't know what that means. Oh, triple Z. Why did you start saying that? Because others around you started saying that. The biggest draw to wanting my spouse to change is that they see me change. Understand that God didn't set up the plan, so he says, look, I'll give my son's life if first you give your life. He said, I'm going to give my son's life. And then he turns around and says, what does it cost for you to follow me? Your whole life. But he didn't start that way. He set the example. I'll give my whole life. And out of your love for me, you'll want to give your whole life. And as the husband, as the representative of who Christ is in the marriage, I can't think of a stronger picture than I'm going to give my whole life. And I'm going to change. So that in time, you turn around and through the power of the Holy Spirit and the working of how this is, you're going to want to change. And I won't have to point it out. You won't feel rejected. You won't feel like you're caught in conflict. You won't. Isn't it beautiful when you look at Scripture? It is, Garth. Thank you. Yeah. So, in trying to practice this was about 2 years ago. I grew up incredibly jealous and somewhat violent in my behavior, and I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of it. A lot of stupid fights. Did a lot of dumb things. When Kim and I were out of high school the year before we got married, we went to Woodfield Mall. At that time, it was the largest mall in America. And we go to this big restaurant, and we're there with a couple of our friends. We drove from Madison all the way to Chicago to go to this mall. And we're eating in this nice restaurant. It's lunchtime, and I notice this busboy just keeps looking at Kim, keeps looking at Kim, keeps looking at Kim. And he's like from me to, the back of those pews. And I finally just go, hey, Skippy, you want to look at my girlfriend? You ask my permission. But if you look over here at her again, you're going to have to pay for it right here in this restaurant. And I mean, my wife's crawling under the table. My friends are like, can we have another table, please? I'm just jealous. So about 2 years ago, I'm wrestling with this. I want my wife to feel completely and utterly accepted. How do I do that? How do I do that? How do I do that? And as someone who has control issues and has to always be, empower and have their way, and if my wife ever cheated on me, I'd kill them both, and just fun thoughts like that. I'm driving home from work one night, and God said, didn't you promise her you'd love her in good times and bad times? Yeah. Rich or poor? Yeah. Sickness and health? Yeah. Wouldn't that include an affair? Well, technically you said if our partner has an affair, we can bail. And he said, yeah, but don't you think that for her to feel completely accepted and never have to worry about rejection, that she should know that even if she had an affair, you'd still love her no matter what? And I started to argue. I listened to the car and go, and the Holy Spirit just downloads all these sins, that I've done with his list of love next to it. Never ending, here's this sin, never ending, here's this sin, never ending love, here's this sin, never ending love, here's this sin, never. I'm like, I'm supposed to be Jesus. So I go home, and she's in the bedroom doing something, and I said, hey, I need you to sit down for a second, I need to tell you something. And isn't it always the worst timing when you feel like you really need to tell your spouse something? Because yeah, I'm gonna, no, you need to sit down. I can't right now. Does it have to be right now? It has to be right now. Okay, hurry up. Well, no, just kind of, I want you to take it. Just hurry up. What is it? No, you need to hear me. So just call, then tell me later. I'm like, no, So I get it, I go, I just want you to know that I'm going to love you forever, which I've said a million times. She's like, okay, is that it? I'm like, no. I want you to know if you ever have an affair. Now this is huge to her because she's had parents that have had affairs and divorces because of it. And I just want you to know that if you ever have an affair with any other man, I will still always love you. I never want you to ever worry about feeling rejected from me, ever. You could just feel the foundation building right there. It just changed her. Because ultimately, whether you think about it all the time or not, that's a fear. Will they reject me? Not just over infidelity, but will they reject me? So I thought, the worst thing that could ever happen, I will never, ever quit loving you. So you identify those things in my life, and I'll work on them. And then I'll help you identify the things in your life if you ask, and you work on those. And we'll take care of these little things. So here are 3 things we can do. What time am I done? I can't even remember. Who put the schedule together? Here are 3 things you can do. Number 1, understand, taken right out of the first 3 books, or the first 3 chapters of Genesis with Adam and Eve, understand that when Adam was created and Eve were created, they were good. They were perfect. They didn't need each other to be fulfilled. They were fulfilled in their walk in their relationship with God. They were perfect, but first time God says it's not good is when he looks at Adam and says it's not good that he's alone. And so he creates Eve and he calls her a helpmate. That actually means that she's the stronger one. It actually means, Adam, you're over your head naming these animals and running this garden. You need a helpmate. You need someone who knows how to pull this together and make it happen. I'm going to create in you Eve. He creates in Eve a helpmate, but understand this. It was because that they needed each other's gifts and abilities. But through that, the helpmate they bring their gifts and talents, but they bring them not to just the marriage, but to the cause. Step number 1, to strengthen your marriage, and when you're going through this, is why are you getting rid of those little foxes? For the cause. What's the cause? You figure it out. What's the cause for your marriage? What are the things you work on together? Is it feeding kids? Is it a ministry at church? Is it sharing the gospel with your neighborhood? Is it raising money for unwed moms who don't have a car? I mean, have a cause. You have a helpmate. You're each other's helpmate. Have a purpose of why you are together. See, because it's easier for me to fix these foxes if I know there's a purpose behind it. Have you ever gone to church and on the way to church you fought? And then you get to church and you're like, I'm here to teach Sunday school and I just got done ripping my husband's head off. Today, kids, we're going to talk about love. Well, if you understand, if I work out my relationship, it's going to make it a lot easier for me to have my cause. Because I know the better I get, the more Christ-like I get, the more it's going to help my cause. And if you have a cause that's together, and you don't always have to have a cause that's together, but if you do, it helps even more. Understand you're each other's helpmate. Number 2, and Sri talked on this a little bit, but be best friends. When Sri said what he wanted in a best friend, I wrote down sense of humor, enjoy spontaneity, loves good conversation. I love that in friends. That's why Jason and I are friends. Sense of humor, spontaneity, love good conversation. But work on being best friends. The Gottman Institute says again and again and again, the marriages that are most successful are simply the ones that are best friends. I love this example because it's so appropriate. I get into the car with my best friend and he's listening to country western music. I hate country western music. Unless it's real country, it's like Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, the country western music. not like Shania Twain. And nothing against Shania Twain. She's just not country. But anyway, I get in the car, and he likes country and western music. I can't stand country western music. But I don't hear the noise, because our conversation and our laughter and our connection goes above the noise. I jump in the car, I'm like, bro, that game last night, oh, I almost texted you, but it was so late, and we just start talking. I'm like, hey, what did Kim do about this? She able to make those cakes for the, yeah, she can. And we're just talking. I don't even hear the country western music. I mean, I know it's playing because that's what I was like, but I don't hear it. Now, if I'm in a fight with my wife, and we're not best friends at the moment, I get into the car and she's playing country western music. I'm like, seriously? We have to listen to this? This isn't godly. You know this person's going to hell right now, right? Shania Twain shaking her hot box all over the stage and says she's a Christian and then she's pro-homosexuality, blah, 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 blah. You know, just shut this crap off. Not that I've ever done or said that. But being best friends covers a lot. You can laugh at when a best friend chews with his mouth open. If you're not best friends with your spouse, you don't laugh. It drives you nuts. You can laugh when your best friend forgets to take the garbage out for the second week in a row and now has to put it in the back of their car and take it to church, work, and throw it away in their dumpster. You're best friends. Be best friends. In the Garden of Eden, before the sin, God made Adam and Eve. Life was perfect. And yet he said two things. He said, one, work the ground, have a purpose. And two, multiply. Be together. Create. Be best friends. Sex is great with your wife. It's even better with your best friend. She better be your wife. Yeah. Be best friends. Isn't it amazing in the garden? You have a job to do as a couple. You're to be together, work on your relationship together. Finally, in that idea, when God created Adam and Eve, He didn't just create Adam and Eve like, let's see where this goes. He had a plan and a legacy in mind. He saw the end of time, where this is going to go. Adam and Eve are the starting point, and there's the ending point. We don't know the ending point. I hope it's soon. But He had from the beginning a legacy in mind. Your marriage should have a legacy in mind. I, God forbid, never want my kids to have this conversation behind my back. Well, we can go to your mom's place on the 24th, Christmas Eve, and then we can go with your dad and his wife on the 25th. Yeah, but how are we going to go to my mom? Well, I don't know, And if you're in that position, I'm not trying to pick on you, but the mindset right now is legacy. Legacy. I have to work through these little foxes if I'm going to leave a legacy. Because if I start over, that legacy is trashed. And then I got to try to start another legacy. And then sometimes we mess up that, I got to start we are in this for the long run. Adam and Eve, boom, boom. The beginning, the start, hit go. Now let's watch the legacy. God chose Lance and Deb. Start a legacy. What are we doing to create that legacy, to strengthen that legacy? There has to be a legacy mindset, because it goes beyond everything else that we sometimes want to fight against. If we know, I don't get to leave a legacy, and if I do, it's going to be a crappy one unless I work on these little foxes, but I don't get to leave a legacy if I divorce after 21 years because it just didn't work. No, you didn't work, because it's work. It's little. Fix it. Fix it. Finally, they made mistakes. Adam and Eve made mistakes. But they understood that for their legacy to continue, they had to overcome their mistakes and keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. I remember the verse in Peter, and I didn't look it up, where it's specific. Peter writes to the men and says, you will be held responsible for your wife's maturity in Christ. You will be held responsible for your wife's maturity in Christ. Well, yeah, but my wife... No. There's no footnote in this verse. You are responsible for your wife's maturity. How much she becomes like Christ will be because of you and your example. That's a heavy verse. But again, I understand that there are a lot of things in my life and in my marriage I don't like. But I do them anyway. I love her anyway. Because of that legacy. Ultimately, when you understand this, you realize this life it's practice run through for heaven. I'm preparing my wife for her role in heaven as a follower of Christ. And what she'll do and the responsibilities she'll have. That's up to me by how I love her, how I live as Christ to her, as Christ did for the church. That's a heavy load, man. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter if she's happy or if I'm happy. I guess it doesn't really matter if I have sex whenever I want to have sex. I guess it doesn't matter if she won't get a job so things are easier financially. I guess it doesn't matter that we have to go to her mom's place for Christmas every year because it's such a big deal. None of those things matter because that's limited to time. I'm called to a legacy which goes beyond time and goes eternal. That's my job description. How's my wife going to function in heaven because of my example? Pretty heavy thought. So, men, remember, it's easy to want great sex, lots of money, and pour all your time and energy into hobbies. But that's not marriage. That's not legacy. That's probably a footnote just for me. Maybe it was. Sorry, that wasn't for you, that was for me. So, trying to have fun and build a friendship and made me think of one of the things Sri said earlier today. Kim was here for the morning. She went back home because our dog was acting up. But anyway, so yesterday afternoon, my sister's supposed to show up at 3:45. 3:45 in the afternoon. I was here at church yesterday morning getting some things ready. Went home, did a couple things, and I go, Sri comes home, or Sri's going to get here in about 3 hours. She's like, yeah, I've got some things to do, whatever. And I'm like, we got 3 hours to kill. What do you want to do? She's like, no, I've got a million things. I just got dressed. And I go, you want Christmas money, right? You're looking for Christmas money? She goes, what? I go, I'll give you $50 right now to take your clothes off. She goes, Garth. I go, 100. She goes, I get it right now? Sure. Best friends do that. Best friends have those type of relationships. By the way, only I'm the only one who gets to pay my wife for sex. I just want to clarify that. So, you're leaving a legacy. One of my friends, John Canning. Jason, do you remember John Canning, friends with Scott Askew? Yeah. Okay. I've told some of you this story, but I'll end with this as far as a legacy. John had, I never met his father, but we always heard these stories about him. One of the stories I heard from John about his dad was about 8-9 years ago. We went to Buffalo Wild Wings to watch the UFC fights. And John was laughing about his dad that day. He talked to his dad. John's a world-class carpenter. I mean, world-class. Gets paid top dollar for what he does. And his dad was a carpenter growing up, but his dad was cheap. Cheap! And so he goes, yeah, I had a conversation with my dad today. This was what he was all excited about. And he would talk like his dad. He goes, guess what, John? Guess what? And this is how he would say it, so excuse me for the offense you. Guess what? I got them bastards at Spectrum to drop my cable bill $3.40. $3.40. And John would be like, what? Who cares, Dad? $3.40. You know how much that is at the end of a year? That's almost $40. And like, whatever, you know. And that was his dad. His dad was the cheapest, like always squeezing a penny. So his dad passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. And his mom, they had the funeral. His mom's like, hey, John, he's the only child. Will you come? And they had like a farmette with about 20 acres and a couple barns and a shed. Will you come and help me clean up? And I don't know how long I want to be here now without your father. So John goes to clean up, and he goes to his main shed because he's got a bunch of tools that are really old because he's cheap, but they're probably also worth some money because they're so old. So he goes, I'll go through it and take the stuff I want, and we'll get rid of the other stuff. And he goes over to one of his main workbenches, and there's literally an old shoebox, tennis shoebox, with some rags on top and something, and he just kind of clears it off. There's $80,000 in the shoebox. He's like, what? Oh, man. So he takes the $80,000, goes into the house, tells his mom, I found $80,000 in the shoebox. And Dad's, she says, yeah, he's hid money everywhere. That's just every time he's found money. So now John's like, oh. I won't tell you the amount because I haven't asked John's permission, but he retired that day when he found how much money his father had hid. All over. True story. John came to do pillars on my house this summer. And he pulls up and we're talking, and he goes, hey, you remember the story about my dad hiding all the money? I'm like, yeah. He goes, so my mom called me last week, or like 2 weeks ago, and said, hey, I'm done with the farmland, I need to sell it, it's too much work. So I went there, and I'm in that same shed, and as I'm getting ready to just go, what should we sell? I have a thought. It would be like my dad to hide stuff in the walls. So he looks at the walls, and it's just plywood. And he goes, that one looks like it's come off and on a few times. Goes over, gets cat's claw, wedges it open, 4 guns, and about 30,000 rounds of ammo. At the end of the day, 80 guns, almost 3 million rounds of ammo. Yeah. You know what that's called? A legacy. Now, I hope to leave my boys my guns and my ammo, but I also want to leave them what a godly marriage looks like. Because the first person my son's going to look at when he has problems with his marriage is his mom and dad's marriage. The first way my son is going to act and react in his marriage is how I acted and reacted in my marriage. It's all about a legacy. I'm catching those little foxes because, not just for me, but for Malachi, my grandson. And for my great-great-grandson. Amen? Amen. We are taking a 10-minute break. Coffee, bathroom. This is your last chance to buy raffle tickets because then we're going to shut it down. Oh, by the way, if you win the gun, you get it today because our gun guy is going to come in at 5 and run your background check. If you don't pass the background check, by default, I get the gun, but thank you for paying. No, I'm kidding. 10 minutes, take a break, talk amongst yourselves, get some coffee, and we'll come back in 10 minutes.